This is part 2 for Lab 3 on the integumentary system, and this section is actually on the body membranes. Excuse me. So the skin is the cutaneous membrane, okay, and it's it's a dry membrane, right? Our skin is dry, but the majority of our membranes are either wet or moist. Body membranes cover surfaces, they line body cavities, and they form protective or lubricating sheets around organs. We're going to first look at epithelial membranes. The majority of our body membranes are epithelial membranes. And epithelial membranes are just a sheet of epithelial tissue bound to underlying connective tissue. I mentioned the skin being the cutaneous membrane, but there's also mucous membranes and serous membranes. So here's just a picture of skin. You can see it's dry. It holds water in by that keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, and it's attached to a thick layer of dense irregular connective tissue. We're just going to kind of ignore the upper layer right here. Going down to the mucous membranes. Mucous membranes are they're a wet or moist membrane, and they line the body cavities that open to the exterior. So if you think about it, our body is like a highly convoluted straw from mouth to anus. Okay, so and just like a straw, like it, think that you're sucking up a smoothie, right? So the smoothie on the inside of the straw, that's the outside world, right? And so the linings from mouth to anus, that's all exposed to the outside world, right? Our digestive tract is an open system, okay? And so we have mucous membranes there that are going to line that tract with mucus. We see, so it's often columnar epithelium. Sometimes it's stratified squamous epithelium, like in our mouth. The difference, what kind of tissue you're going to see, depends on what type of kind of abrasion that tissue's exposed to. So our mouth, we like take bites of bagel, right? And toasted bagel is sharp. And, we chew it around, and while we're chewing it around, we're just cutting up our mouths all over the place. We're just cutting the upper layer of the epidermis, so we generally don't feel it. But we certainly need multiple layers of epithelium in our mouth. Once you get down to areas like our small intestine, we need columnar epithelium. And columnar epithelium is found in areas where there's a lot of absorption. Okay, but regardless of whether we're looking at the mucous membranes of our mouth or if we're looking at the mucous membranes of our small intestine, we're going to see these little goblet cells that produce mucin that turns into mucus. Okay, next we have the serous membranes, and the serous membranes are moist membranes that are found within closed body cavities. So in Lab 1, you learned about the pleural cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity and the pericardial cavity. Those cavities are all lined by serous membranes. And the serous membranes have two layers. There's a layer that's on the organ itself, which is called the visceral membrane, and there's the layer that's on the cavity, and that's the parietal membrane. Okay, so the pericardium of the heart is kind of the bag that surrounds the heart. The outer layer of the heart itself forms what's called the visceral pericardium, right? It's the layer that's attached to the organ. That bag that kind of encases the heart, the layer of that's facing the heart is the parietal pericardium. We'll go through a lot more on these in 218. This is just kind of a warm-up. And so here we can see, here's the visceral pericardium and the parietal pericardium. And in between, there's this fluid-filled cavity. And that cavity is really important. Our heart beats 24/7, and without the fluid here, there'd be a lot of abrasions to the heart surface. But because the fluid is there, our heart can just keep pumping without getting damaged. These serous membranes are made of a simple squamous epithelium. And sometimes they're double layered, so there's actually 2 layers of simple squamous epithelium. Okay, in your lab practice slideshow, there's a picture of a slide of that simple squamous tissue that makes up the mesothelium. Okay, and this is just kind of a little bit of a review. We have the pleural cavity and the pericardial cavity, and so the serous membranes here are the pleural membrane, and if it's on the lungs proper, it's the visceral. If it's in the cavity, it's the parietal. We have the pericardial membrane, and then the abdominal pelvic cavity is surrounded by peritoneum. So we have the visceral peritoneum, the outer layer of the majority of our digestive organs, such as the liver, the stomach, the small intestine, and large intestine. And then the layer that lines the cavity, which is the parietal layer. The other type of membrane we have is a connective tissue membrane, and it's the synovial membrane. So in the majority of our joints between the 2 bones, there's a little cushion, and that cushion is made from a sac of connective tissue. And on the inside of that sac of connective tissue is fluid called synovial fluid. So the connective tissue is known as the synovial membrane. And this is really important in protecting the ends of our bones. Okay, the ends of our bones do have a nice hard layer of cartilage, but our bones put up with a lot from us, and so this fluid, can really absorb shocks, and hopefully helps our knees and fingers last as long as the rest of us do. So that's all we need to know for synovial membranes. So again, we have the epithelial-based membranes, the cutaneous, serous, and mucous membranes, and then we have the connective tissue membrane, the synovial membrane. I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.